Basically, we have done the 2000 plus. We done the 2000 plus training workshops. We primarily focus on like a big data and a data science. And yeah, we are basically industry experts. And this is the areas primarily which we focus, like the big data and data science, AI, ML, BI, and the data visualizations, and the cloud and the DevOps. This is our meetup group. So this is a really good meetup group. If you guys want, and you can join this meetup group. So let's first talk about the monolithic applications. So what are the basically monolithic applications, right? So first, when we are going to talk about the monolithic applications, right? We know, guys, I hope most of you guys are already aware about the monolithic applications, but if we go for the definitions, right? If we want to understand in a two-liner that what's the monolithic application? Monolithic applications are designed to handle multiple related tasks. They are generally typically the complex applications which encaps the several tightly coupled functions. The one of the good example, right? If you want to understand that here from the monolithic application, you can think about the e-commerce application. When we talk about the e-commerce application, the e-commerce application is a combination of the number of functionalities, right? You can talk about the login, you can talk about the product management, you can talk about the cart management, you can talk about the order management, you can talk about the inventory management, you can talk about the payment, you can talk about the delivery, you can talk about a lot of modules from the machine learning AI side also, which can suggest the products to the customer that, if you're looking for this project, why not you're considering these products also? Because other customers who placed order for the product X, they about the product Y or product Z also, which is called the concept of the master basket in e-commerce, right? So when you're going to talk about the e-commerce application, right, as a monolithic application, so we are considering all these applications basically, or you can say all these modules inside a single package, right, which you can see in a diagram also. So if you see in a diagram also, basically we have the clients, basically the laptops or the client, you can think about like the mobile also, from where via the laptop we are hitting the browser, we are typing the e-commerce URLs, or via the mobile, via the apps we can access, which go to the generally the GSLB, which is a global server load balancer, and then you can see that it is going to the one server where we have a one var, right? And that var basically contains all the functionality. So basically, whatever the functionalities we talk about, you can talk about the login, you talk about the product management, inventory management, cart management, your payment, your inventories there, all that stuff we combined in a single package, and that single package we are going to do. That's the primary, it's called is a monolithic application, right? If you're going to talk about something like a 2000, 2002, 4, 5, or 6, right, till 2008 and 9, right, till most of the companies, right, which were building the monolithic applications, right, and as a part of monolithic applications, whatever the modules they can think of it or they need it for the application, right, they build it, they package together, right? They create generally the single artifact or max to max 2 artifacts, right? One maybe for the UI, another for the backend services, and then combine and deploy it, right? That's we can treat as a primary the monolithic application. Right, so this is the basically monolithic application where you can see that we have a different applications we package, and yeah, we generally have a database, we interact from the database and fetch the data and display to these things. And this is the monolithic application. Now points comes at here that what's the issues with the monolithic application. The issues with the monolithic application at here, if we focus on that part, right, the one of the major issues we can think of it that difficult to scale. Why it is difficult to scale? Now think about the company, it may be the startup, it may be full-fledged company, they started their e-commerce website. Okay, it may be their use base, concurrent use may be like 1,000 customers on a daily basis, right? And they build it as a monolithic application. Today they have 1,000 users, right, on the daily basis. It may be in the future or after some time, maybe 5,000, 10,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, right? It just can grow with the time. But the problem with these things, the monolithic application to scale it, that's the pain, right? The concern at here that we package the complete all the applications, right? When I'm saying the all the applications, I am talking about logging. We talk about the product search, we can talk about the cart management, we talk about the order management, we talk about the inventory, we talk about the payment and all that stuff. Out of these modules, which we combine it together and package single artifact, right? When we're going to deploy these things on any server, right? Some of the modules, which is memory space intensive, right? They need the more memory to execute the program. Some of the applications, maybe the CPU oriented, which are more CPU intensive, right? They need the more CPU power to execute on that part, right? There are some of the background jobs also, which is going to run, which is going to take a lot of time on that part, right? So when you package all these things together, right, then it's going to take a lot of piece of code, right, which some are going to consume a lot of memory, some is going to more focus on the CPU side, right? And when we have to run that single war file, but a single package, we need the high-end chip. And we know that after high-end machine also, right, these are some limitations, right? They can support maybe like, 5,000 concurrent, maybe 6,000, not more than that, right? So once we are going to scale down these things, right? And after once we are going to scale further these things, right? We have to put a complete heavy package on a high-end servers, right? We cannot put on a low-end servers because in that scenario, if the CPU or the memory may not have a sufficient memory or sufficient CPU power to manage the complete application. So we don't have a choice. We have to always go for the high-end systems, which are generally costly, right? And when we're talking about the scaling part, right? When we're going to talk about the scaling part, it's not something that each and every module we have to scale it. Now take the example of Black Friday sale, right? If we observe the customer behavior, right? As a customer, what's our behavior there, right? That estimate if I'm playing the role of the customer, right? I'm going to log in the application. So it may be the login module called once time. Then I'm going to search for some product. It may be it's called also one time. Once I search for the product, assume I'm looking for the mobile phone with the 5 GB technology, right? So I got the 40 mobiles or maybe 50 mobiles as a part of e-commerce. When I'm going to click on each and every mobile, right? It may be the module which is going to fetch the product ratings or which is going to fetch the product details, right? Which is going to call multiple times, right? So if we see that complete journey, right? If we see the user behavior, the login in this flow, the login module called once time. The product search is called the once time. But when you're going to talk about the product rating, right, or the product description, it may call the 49, right? So for that piece of modules, right, we need to scale. But the point at here that everything packaged, right, as a single package, right, that we are putting the multiple copies of the login or the product search also, which we may not require to scale. The more focus of the scaling is there, where actually we really need it, right? Which is the product rating or the product descriptions and other product attributes that part, right? So we are going to scale on that part. So the cost is going to be higher, but after the one limit, it's difficult to scale also. The another point or another issues which you can see the higher maintenance cost. Why I'm saying it's a higher maintenance cost, right? Because the learning curve for the monolithic application is generally high. If you're going to recruit the more new team members, we need the more new team members, right? It is going to take time, right, to train these resources or these developers or to explain the technology or to explain the complete portfolio, to explain the complete domain about that part also, right? So the learning curve is generally high. Now, another problem at here that if they find any issues, right, they do the RCA, right? So for debugging of the complete flow is going to take, because every module, every piece of code is combined as a single artifact. Even we are going to touch the single line of code, right? sometimes we don't know that if we are fixing this issue, if we are doing the changes in an XYZ file, is it maybe going to impact the ABC file or MNP file, right? So for these things, even we are doing the single line of code change, we have to again test the complete applications. We have to run all the regression test cases, which also take time, right? So what is going to happen because of that part, right? To fixing the single bug, right? Or to push the single bug to the production, and the fix of that single bug in a production, it's going to take more time. It's need more efforts, right? And that's the reason we are saying that it is the higher maintenance cost. Higher startup time, yes, higher start time. It also matters because it's become like a very big application, very big artifacts, right? And when it's going to start up, right, it is going to take the more time. Now, some parties, some of people maybe think this thing. What's the big deal? Yes, what is the really big deal? Assume it, if your artifact is pretty much heavy, right, and it's going to take 5 minutes, right, each time to start up, right? And my one developer is going to start that application, and putting the ID is also pain because there are a lot of things are there, a lot of piece of code is there. If it is going to take 5 minutes for these things, and my developer is going to start the 6 times a day, right? So approximately the 30 minutes we are just wasting because of the higher start for per developer. If per developer is spending like a 30 minutes per daily basis, in 22 minutes, multiply with the 30 days, right? And if you're going to assume that, if you're going to go for like the 10,000 developer in an organization, and if you're going to multiply with the $50 per USD cost, that means approximately 55 lakhs USD we are wasting every year. If you're going to convert in Indian currency as approximately 72 or 73 again, we are wasting approximately 40 crores rupees efforts, right? So that's look maybe sometime in a small amount, like a 2 minutes, 3 minutes, going to take more. But if you're going to go with the statics and with the data, right, it's a lot of money is on a stack, right? Apart from this thing, is it difficult to manage? Yes, it's difficult to manage, right? Because you're not going to manage the one chunk of the application, you manage the complete application with a single package, right? It's difficult to manage on that part. In case we have to do small change these things, we have to test the complete application, right? Because we don't know, right? If you're going to change, if you're going to touch the XYZ file, it may be impact the other things also, right? Because the single package is there. Higher learning curve, as we discussed that, if I have to hire someone, if the new team member is going to come, right, it may be that person have expertise in a price area, right, but may not be in inventory. But as complete code is combined, it's more tightly coupled a piece of code. So I have to teach to that person that, but okay, this is the code flow, this is the model, this all that part, these things, and to understand need that takes a lot of times, and that's the reason I'm saying it's going to take higher learning curve. When you will take barrier to adopt the multiple technologies and new technology stacks, yes, you have to understand that part. If you're going to go to Monolithic Application, right, so you have to decide that, okay, we are going to go for Java J2 stack, or maybe .NET stack, or maybe some other stack. But once we decided, we cannot change the stack. That's another biggest problem. You cannot experiment, you cannot keep experimenting with the new technologies. If you're thinking that, okay, till now I was using like a Java, in future, if I want to use this, build some of the piece of code in a Python, that's not practically feasible, right? So it is the blocker for the new technologies. And we know in the last 10 to 15 years, how technologies change, right? And it's going to keep changing for the coming few years also, right? So once we zero down our tech stack, we are blocked, or you can say we are locked with the technology stack is there, and we don't have a room to do that part. So these are some of the major challenges with the monolithic applications, and companies realize that, monolithic applications not going to suit their requirements, and they finally thought that, okay, they have to plan or they have to think about the migration to the microservice stuff. So that was like a pain area, some of the major pain areas there. Apart from these things, there are a lot of other pain areas associated with the monolithic applications, but these are some of the major areas which not impacting the technology decisions. It's also start impacting the business also. Because when you're going to talk about the monolithic application time, or from the business point of view, time to market concept is very important, right? And if you're going to take more time because of just your higher learning curve, because of the some piece of code, there are a lot of testing stuffs there, a lot of regression is there. We don't have a full-fledged CI pipeline because it's difficult to manage the CI pipeline, especially the monolithic scenarios there, right? So because of all that part, time to market is going to be increased, which is going to impact in the business also. So company thought that okay, monolithic may not be a right fit for our needs, right? And we have to think about the microservice-based architecture-based applications. So when they start thinking on that part and needs comes to understand that first, what's the microservice architecture, right? So you guys can see that, this is the microservice architecture applications. What the microservice architecture application says, right? Microservice application says that, whatever your application is there, right? For your applications, you are identifying the independent components, and these things you build the independent services, right? So your application is a combination of a lot of services, and each and every service is basically independent service. What's the meaning of independent service? That means that service is not depend on another service, right? And that's a combination of a lot of services are there, and on the basis we build the microservice applications, right? We will do the more deep dive while we are going to talk about the migration study, but at a very high level, that's the things we can understand the microservice applications. In case somebody want to go about the history of the microservices things, you can go to the microservice wiki page and you can get to know on that part. But the microservice concept started something like 2009. Then the further discussions happened in like 2011, and then people think about that directions, and it's become the full-fledged architectural style also. But yeah, let's talk more about that part. So now when you're going to talk about, once you are going to talk about that, once you have a monolithic applications, then when and why we will think about migrating the microservice applications. If we know that we want to build the application, right? We want to build the application and we don't have any scalability requirements there. It's going to be used by some limited set of users, right? Which can be easily support and we can manage these things. There's no specific non-functional requirements there, right? And the logic is not very complex and not a much room to break that applications there. Yeah, monolithic application makes sense. But if you're going to build an application where you are expecting that in future you have to scale like anything, I'm saying scale like anything, that means if you may have today 1,000 users, in the future you may have 10,000, 50,000, 10 lakh users, like that. You have to think about the microservice architecture, right? If you're going to think about that part, okay, I have to reduce the maintenance cost. It's a time that I have to use the full utilization of CI/CD pipelines. I have to reduce the cost from the infrastructure side point of view. I want to keep experiment with the new technology. When I say like a new technologies, like that's mean the some of the piece of code built in a Java, some of the piece of code may be built in a Go language, some of the piece code may be in like a Python. For the deployments, right? I can think about the Dockers, I can think about the Kubernetes for deployments. Apart from this, if some of the application, some of the piece of code I make, or some of the legacy code, maybe I can utilize from like a .NET or some other applications, right? When that's the things, or that's the things basically are thinking these things, it makes sense. It makes sense to migrate the microservices things. But how to proceed on that part? If you're going to build the greenfield project, that's mean from the scratch, it makes sense to start with the MSA or the microservice architecture. But if there is already one project is already built, that's mean we call it a brownfield project, right? And that's the project is there. Then when we have to start to planning to do that. So guys, whenever we know or we have decided, okay, that we have to go for the MSA, we start the migration asset. Why it's going to make asset? If you're going to delay that process for the migration process, then it is going to come with the pain area, because there are a lot of application, a lot of code is already built these things. If you're going to further delay these things, then further code is going to add on the top of your monolithic applications, because you keep enhancing that your application, right? And finally, you have to migrate a complete piece of code in a microservice architecture based services, right? So it makes sense that to reduce the rework, we have to think and we have to migrate the microservice architecture as soon as possible, right? So that's the basically answer, that when and why. So to just summarize things, it may be if you're going to build the application which may be used by the internet users, or maybe 10,000 or 5,000 users or 10,000, not more than that part. If you're thinking that that application code is not going to frequently change in that part, and the piece of code is basically, you can type of like a module, not a lot of functionalities are there, you're not going to frequently change. CI/CD is not very important, it's not going to add much value to you, these things. Then you can think about the monolithic application. Otherwise, for rest of the cases, we think about the microservice application, and answer is as soon as possible. Okay, so that's the way basically we have to think, and we have to take the call on that part. Yeah, just a one disclaimer, right? When we're going to think about, and when we are going to take the call that to migrate to microservice testings, right? It's come up with the cost, right? It looks very easy that, why not migrate the application from the, monolithic to microservice testings? But guys, based on experience, right, that journey is not easy, right? It's, you can say, a bit tricky journey, right? Because when you're going to think on that side testings, the senior stakeholders who are going to play the key role for the migrations, right? These guys should have a really good knowledge about it too. They should know the business cases, that what are the permutation combination of the business cases there, what's the failure scenarios are there, what's the exception scenarios are there. All these things they should know. They should know that, how the microservices things works, what's the some of the pain areas with the microservice testings, right? And when where they're going to try to migrate the things there, what's their approach should be there, right? Because even there are a lot of seasoned architects, right? They work on a lot of technology stacks there, right? They are really good from an architecture point of view, right? But sometimes as the microservice, I cannot say that's like something new concept, right? So you can say like a decade old concept almost, right? Because particularly from last 6-7 years, basically, I am personally, going through the journey from the like monolithic to the microservice personally also. So, right? I mean, yeah, but still a lot of people know, a lot of people are claiming this thing is there, but sometimes they go for one of few of the things, or sometimes their approach is not correct, or sometimes they miss the some things, and finally what is going to happen, right? That whatever the efforts we put to build a microservice, right? Once we build, then it's come with a lot of pain areas, and it's difficult to balance. So I suggest, based on my experience, that whenever you think about the migration approach, right, we will start with the baby steps. What do you mean of the baby steps at here, right? The first thing, basically, we have to do it, that we have to identify. We have to basically identify the independent components. What a problem at here that, right, what the mistake people do sometimes, right? They think to, identify the independent piece of code. They think to migrate the code. That should not be the approach. The approach should be there that, we are going to migrate the components, not code. Yeah, indirectly, basically, we are going to migrate the code, but that should be an approach. We have to first identify the independent components, right? Now, let's take the example of the e-commerce application, right? Because why I didn't took the e-commerce things, because this is the one of the really good case for the migration point of view. And this is a domain, right, which I don't have to explain to my audience, because I hope most of the participants already done the online shoppings. They already placed orders. They are comfortable how to search the products. They know how to add the cards, what the issues comes, or what the business cases come with the cards, and how the payment happen, right? It's pretty straightforward, common domain, right? So at high level, everyone is aware of these things. So yeah, as a part of demo, or as a part of case studies, for the migration itself, we are going to talk about the e-commerce application. So how should we do to proceed in that scenario? So first you have to identify the independent components. So rather than doing the horizontal slicing these things, we will think about the vertical slicing there. So basically we have to identify the components. So right, if you look the one e-commerce application side, first we have to identify the components, right? So it may be, once I'm going to think about these things, then we can think about the one authentication authorization, what is one of the component, right? This is another component which we can think about, the user profile management, right? Because user can register, user can update the profiles, user can mention the addresses, right? To change the address, can add the multiple address, shipping address there, can define the multiple billing address also there. So that's we can think about the user profile. Somebody can come and say that, okay, the address components, right? Address section, right? To managing this thing, maybe the separate component. Yes, you may be that. So basically, first we have to define the high-level components, and if we think that major component, you can say, and further you want to break the major components and sub-components. That's the approach you have to do it also. So at the first stage, you can define the user profile, but you think that user profile should be the one component. Address will be the separate components. Yes, you can think about that part. The payment, right? In case you are offering some wallet services, right? That should be the different component. The product management, right? When you're going to talk about the product management, that how many product quantities there, what type of product is there, what are the options are there, what's the options there, right? If you're going to look for some shoe, right, then different size of shoe will be there, right? If you're looking for the clothes, right, then different color combinations will be there. So that's basically we're talking about the product management there, that how we're going to take care about the product management, what's the variations will be there, right? You can talk about the product descriptions, right? You can talk about the price model. You can talk about the rating module, right? We read the products also. That should be the separate module. The product reviews, right? We are writing the reviews also. That should be the separate module itself. If you want to implement the AI or ML stuff, right? Like if, for example, of like the master basket concept, which you can use it for the big data also, right? That should be the separate, because these are the independent components which we can think of it. Like the cart management, right? Because once we have finalized the product, right? We add in a cart, right? Cart may be the separate component will be there. Order management will be the separate component. Inventory management may be the separate component, right? Delivery, right? The logistic model, you can think separately on that part. So you can first identify the major components, right? Which are generally independent each other. After identifying the component, right? After identify the component, now we have to define the dependencies. What's the mean of the dependencies at here? When you're going to talk about a logistic model, right? It may be directly, indirectly depend on your address system, right? When you're going to talk about the inventory management, right? Some layer here and where it's dependent to the cart management also. Because now think about that, okay, if you have the 100 or not 100 maybe like a low amount distance. Assume it, you have the like the 10,000 devices for any specific model, and which is going to launch, right? And you are offering a really great discount, right? A lot of offers are associated. Then it may be for these 10,000 devices, you're going to get the 1 lakh requests, right? Then who is going to get and when? The person who is going to like a payment first, or who the added in a cart, or these things, right? That's logics you can apply in various things, right? So here basically that your inventory management somehow depend on a cart management also. So basically you have to define some dependencies to define the use cases also. So once you define the components, like I'm not saying that you have to start touching the code these things, but yeah, start looking the codes, start looking the business cases, and on the basis, first identify the list of the components, right? The good approach at here that first define the high level components, and once you define, to just ensure that you're not missing any part at here, and then you have to start identify you have to further define these major components like sub components, and then you can define the dependency on paper, right? Once you're done with that part, right, then as I mentioned that we have to go with the baby steps, right? So don't think, okay, now the Monolithic application is there, we have to start breaking these things and we start doing with all the components parallelly. Yes, this is not a right approach. Generally what we do once you're going to like an architecture design in this thing is there, right? First we pick up the approach, do the POC, validate the POC, and then do some more modules, apply that POC on 2-3 modules, and then we go to the full-fledged, right? Whenever you're going to release the application in a real time, especially for the enterprise application, you generally don't full-fledged deploy for all the users, right? What we do, sometimes for the 5%, 10% to the pilot users. Once we get the quick feedback, if we say, okay, things are going good, not major feedbacks here, then 5% to, then we are making to the 100%. So here also, the baby steps you have to go for that part. So once you define the components, right, after defining the components, you can pick up the one component and you can start building the APIs. What's the mean of start building the APIs? This doesn't mean that I'm going to say that no, it's a time to write the code. No. Still, you can think basically more. You are going to just define the API side. When I'm saying the APIs, I hope everyone understands the APIs and web service concepts. In case you are not aware of it, please spend some time, do some Google about the APIs and a web service and can do it. But yeah, there are some of the really good tools are available in the market, and Swagger is one of the really good tools which can help you define the create APIs. How is it going to help you? So let me explain you that part also, because this is one of the really good tool. Let me open and show you that tool. So Swagger is basically one tool, right, which you can see it at here, right, which you can see at here. So when you're going to talk about this Swagger tool, guys, this is really good tool. Most of guys, I hope, already work on a Swagger. Swagger is really always a tool, right, till today. Right, I'm not sure in future maybe some great better tool than come this things, right? But right now Swagger is really good tool for the API documentation also. But I'm not sure that how many participants actually know the full capability of Swagger. Swagger is really always some tools. And once you're going to think about to build a first API approach, right? To focus on first building the API approach, this is a really great tool. And this tool, it's really good for the low-level designings, and especially for the UI guys also, right? Because sometimes they are depend on a backend to get the services started. So generally, once we work in agile mode, we have a 2-week sprint, and we have the stories for the UI people and for backend people also, right? And estimate if I'm playing the role of the UI developer, and I am just going to think about that, I just want to add the product, update the product, delete the product. So some of the services for this thing, I have to build the UI. Now I talk to the backend person that, buddy, I need these APIs, right? When you're going to give to me, he maybe say that here today just when I started, right? It will take another 5 days, 6 days, or 8 days, then I'm going to do it. Till that time, what I can do it as a UI developer, I can build a UI, but I cannot test it because I don't have the live API or live web service there. So I may request to my backend person, okay, buddy, till that time you're going to do it, you do it. Can you build a mock service? It may that person say, but I don't have a time, I'm already overloaded, right? So then I'm going to depend on that part. I can use this tool. This is basically the Swagger. You can access this tool, right, with this URL, which is basically editor.swagger.io, right? So you guys can open it. That's the left side. You can see the specification, which is called the Open AI language. It's pretty straightforward on that part. Right side, basically, you can see the here. So this is the Swagger API where we are talking about one of the pet store, which is again the e-commerce application. And here this e-commerce applications, especially for the pets, and that's the reason you can see this is the pet store is here. And this open API documentation, which you can see these things, which is the plain vanilla, you can say the YML stuffs, right? So which the way you can write it, and it is going to give you the ready-made services. Whenever we talk about the web APIs or the services, 3-4 things are very important on that part. The first thing is the URI, right, which is basically unique resource identifier. So whenever you're going to build the APIs or whenever you're going to build a basically web service, so 3-4 things we needed. And the first major thing which we needed, the URI, because which URL or which URI I'm going to get the hit and going to hit and provide the input and going to get the response. So this is basically you can define it here. Second point, that once I'm going to send the request, what type of HTTP method I'm going to use it? Is it I'm going to use a GET, put, push, so everything you can see it here. What about other things you can do it? That whatever your request object is there basically. So if I'm going to see these things, you can click on a like it, try it out, right? So that's the way you can define the whatever your input format is there, and then you can choose that what's the input is there. You want to give the input in form of the JSON or the XML. So choose the things and you can click on execute also. Once you're going to click on execute, right, then it is going to give you the response also, which you can see it here. Now the point is there that I have given the dummy input, so which you can change it also. Like a one something, whatever you want to give it on that part. So whatever basically I'm going to do it, it is going to give you the response body also with the code. If it is 200, that means successful, right? So that means bad result. So basically, let's come back to the point on that part. This is a tool which can help you to build or to create the APIs without writing a single line of code. Here you can define the YML and you can see the Swaggle. So Swaggle is a tool which can help you for the documentation, and it helps you to create the mock APIs. What's the mean of mock APIs? That you're giving the mock input, it's going to give the mock response, right? So that's the things you can do it. And what's the beauty of this tool? That as an architect, once we pick up that, okay, I'm going to build it for the reading and the review, this thing is here. So I can think about create review, update. It's depend on the function. If you want to give it a good, if you don't want to get your choice, or the delete the reviews, or can to read the reviews, or you can look for the reviews that, okay, for the first 1 rating, for the 2 rating, or for the 5 rating. So for these things, you can quickly build the right format in a YML file as an architect, and you can see the response at here. Hence, once you created the response at here, you can offer to the UI team also, so they can build the APIs or the UIs. Sorry, they can build the UIs, or it may be WUI strings, right, to do it, because it help you, right? That whatever APIs you have think of these things, you can visualize this thing. You say, oh, if I'm giving this type of input, this is the output going to it. So basically, I personally use this tool a lot for the API first approach these things. So this is the tool basically can help you. So you can see that whatever the services you want to define it at here, like a get listings, user listings for the store. When you're going to get the store, push the store, get, delete this thing, everything you can get it, and for everything you can get the descriptions and everything. So this is parallelly just creating these things, and for these things you have to just define the things at here and you can process it. If you want to go for the documentation, at the top you can see the documentation. Let me go it at here also. So in case if I'm saying that this is authorization, right? So if I'm deleting the authorizations, you can see authorization service. Now the filter is at here. If I'm going to type the ABC filter, so that's a quick, like it's basic type of hot deployment, right? You are changing the code in an open API and immediately you can see the changes also, right? So this is the, as I mentioned, this is one of the really good tool for defining the API. So what basically we can do this thing. So let's come back to the topic on that part. So basically we first define the components. And then if needed, we can do the further drill down in the next level of exercise. Then we need to clearly define that what are dependencies are there, right? That you can note down. Then you can take the one module which is independent, which is not dependent on any other module. You can take the example of like the rating at here and the reviews there, which is not dependent, maybe not any other modules, these things, right? So that's the one module you can think of it. You can create the APIs, right? And you can build it. Now, we build a one module, but is it we actually build the microservices? Answer, maybe no. Why I'm saying answer maybe no on that part? Because when you're going to talk about a microservice architecture, we need the base framework also on that part. What's the meaning of the base framework at here? Let me walk you through that part. So, right, I hope you guys can see this diagram, and this is a diagram which can help you to understand what type of base framework or what type of ecosystem I am talking about, right? So basically, you are going to look this diagram at here, right? So you can see that once from the UI, if somebody is going to hit your services, right? So here, basically, we have to think about the Joule. So guys, whatever tag stack I'm talking about as a base framework, which is basically you can say Netflix OSS tag stacks, right? Most of the companies prefer that tag stack. I hope you guys are aware about the Netflix, the company which offer the service like movies on the red. Also, there are a lot of load is there. They have around approximately 500 plus microservices for the Netflix also, and they build that tech stack and they offer the free of cost. So anybody want to do some POC, want to do it and a live testing on for production also, you can use it, right? Some of the companies basically they created their own circuit breakers, they some created their own service discovery also. So it's very organization to organization tech stack is there. But yeah, number of companies use this thing, and this is you can tech stack, you can use it for the production also. So yeah, let's come back to topic, right? That we are talk about this thing. So first you build it, the one ecosystems. Now we talk about the one basic framework, or you can say application framework, or you can say to build an ecosystem which can help you to run your microservices. So basically how do things works on that part. So once the request will come, then you need the each server. So for Netflix, basically we use the Joule, right? So what's the basically Joule? Joule is a edge server at here. It's somewhere basically you can say type of small API gateway, right? The guys who are already aware about the API gateway say, yeah, we know that we have the APG API gateway, we have the CA API gateway. So generally we use it, but yeah, at a lower level we can use this is like a type of single entry point, which is basically edge servers. For these things, you don't have to write a lot of piece of code. There's some line of code which you have to write it in case you write it code. Otherwise, you can available at the net. You can search it and you can publish it. You can utilize it that part also. Then basically you have the load balancer. What's the mean of the load balancer, right? When we think about the enterprise level application, right? So we have a multiple level load balancers here. Once the users come, then we have a global load balancer that where the request may be routed, right? Which primarily based on a proximity. That okay, if you build the e-commerce applications, there's a code deploy at the US location, then a code deploy on a Singapore location. If you are an India location, then this is what global load balancer is going to ensure that your code is going to route to the Singapore because India is near to this thing. So more or the based on a user proximity, basically the question is going to assign that part. If there is some issues with the Singapore location or that servers there, then it is going to route to here. So that's approach we use for the DR also, right? Then once you are going to for the space Singapore location with server is there, and the further a lot of load balancer will be there. So generally 2 to 3 level of load balancers there. And finally, we have the ribbon also, which is also used for the load balancer. Now, when we're going to talk about the microservice architecture, we have to understand that part, right? It further consists of 2 layers. One which is called the composite layer, and second is called the final coord services, and you can say fine-grained services, which are the microservices. And we will talk about more than that. First, we talk about that ecosystem. So once the load will be come on that part, so we have the ribbon also. Now the point at here that once the request come, right, to the load balancer, how does load balancer know that for which servers or what service is deployed on which servers, right? Because it may be you can say that, okay, this is the right review service which I deploy on a server S1, server S2, and server S3. Some issue come to the S3 server and it's down. How does load balancer know S3 is down? Okay, it means somehow it's know that S3 is down, right? But is it how it's know that if S3 is down and now S4 or S6 is available? So for these things, basically we have the service discovery, which is BSA service discovery server, which is called the Netflix 𝐜𝐿𝐴, right? And that's come with the like a client and a server both, right? For a Netflix 𝐜𝐿𝐴, so which tell to the load balancer that buddy for this service, these are the servers where basically code application is, or this service is deployed on that part. So all that information will get content. So whenever the request come to the load balancer for writing the review, it is going to talk to the service discovery, which is basically Eureka. Okay, tell me, buddy, for the right review these things, how many servers are available which are up and running, and where actually the this service is deployed. That information pass to the load balancer. Now it's totally depend on the load balancer that how it's going to respond, right? Basically, or how it's going to distribute the load. That's algo is at as usual on the load balancer level. So based on that part, so once basically load balancer come on that part, it is going to talk to the Eureka server each and every time and going to get to know, okay, well, the request here. Once it get to know, then further it is going to deploy the things. Generally, when we build applications, we generally talk about the happy path scenarios, but we know it's a real time, right? And real time is full of the challenges, full of the surprises, right? So it's happened like, sometimes we are going to hit the service, we are not going to get the time. We are not going to get a response. It may going to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but till that time, should we have to hold it or not? So for all that part also, there's a mechanism is available. So we have a circuit breaker, which is basically we can use the Netflix stick here to monitoring the services also, right? So basically that's the things we have to take care. Now we already build a small services. So basically we are talking about distributed architecture. And when we're going to talk about a distributed architecture, or we deploy the service on a different servers, right? We need a one place where we have all the configuration at the application level for all the services, right? So for these things, we need the centralized configuration server also. So we have to think about the Spring Cloud config server in case we're going to for the Spring, right? For the authentications, because previously what happened, we have a Monolithic applications and they come one time is authenticated, that's within a WARD file or within that single piece of code, right? Or you can say within the same trust boundary, then you further not need it. Now you have an independent service, independent deployable unit. So one service A is going to talk to service B. Again, it's going to be authenticate and authorize, or try to send the token for the authentication, all that part. So for all these things, you have to think about authentication, authorization also. You can think about the Spring Cloud, you can think about the Spring Security or two. There are a lot of options are available. And now, another major area, which is very critical from the maintenance point of view, and that's the point called the centralized logs, right? Because once you have a Monolithic application, the single log file out here. Now you have an independent services, independent deployable. Everyone is going to write their own log, right? So now think about a prod support person. Some issues come, it know, okay, for this service, for this flow, there are total 10 to 12 services are there. So we are expecting to the prod support person to open these all the 10 and 12 log files to debug the issues or to identify issues. That will be very cumbersome process, very difficult process for these things, or very issues they have to analyze these things. So for these things, you think about the centralized log analysis, where we can think about a Splunk, we can think about the 𝐜𝐭𝐴 tag stack. So that's the basically the ecosystem I am talking about that part. So for these things that we have to build it, that's the one-time efforts, right? And it's required a lot of expertise to write that piece of code, because there are a lot of things which you have to think it more on a technical side of things and from the NFR perspective. So we have to spend the time to build it. But once it's ready, then after that, building the web services will be the key part for us. So till now, what the journey we have covered on that part. So if we are again coming back to the slides. If you're again coming to the points at here, which you can see that here. So till now, what are things basically we have done, that we identify the components on paper. Okay, we have not written a single line of code. Then we further do the drill down, whatever the sub-independent topics may be there. That's the exercise we have done that part. Then apart from these things, right, what we have done, we identify the basically all the dependencies, and once that thing is done, then we pick up the one module, or you can say one component, and we create the APIs. But guys, just hold on, we have not written the single line of code at here. Till now, what are things basically we have done that is these things, we just design the APIs using the Swagger, right? And still, we just write the YML, right? And the mock APIs with the documentation is ready with us. Now, once we that part, and now we are going to write the code. So to ensure that for the technical requirement perspectives, right, we have to build that ecosystem, and that's part of ecosystem. We have to build the services discovery, service discovery servers, circuit breakers, monitoring each server, all things we have to do it. Looks a lot of piece of code we have to write it. Answer is no. Because what I think, if I mentioned it to you, in case you want to use for the Netflix OSS, so for all that stuff, your ready-made code is available, right? You have to just copy paste and integrate with a piece of code, which is hardly going to take 2 days or maybe 3-day efforts. For the some of the developer which already went to that journey, maybe take a 1 day. Right, this well, person to person technical skill, but yeah, you can say high level 1 to 3 days max to max, right, to do it. So that's the one base level is there, right? Yeah, organization to organization, project to project, domain to domain, some requirements may vary, right, to build up these frameworks, right? So once we done it, now we can start writing the code or to building the code for which we have created the APIs. Now, beauty of creating the APIs by the cycle testing is that we have done the low-level design. Now, for the developer, right, even he don't know much about the domain, right? So if I'm going to hire the developer, if I'm just provide the information about the review part, even he don't know how the inventory works, how the other domains work, these things. Because here our focus is there that just build the right review service, which he know it. He have that what should be the URL, what type of request there, what should be the request format will be there, what should be the response it has to return these things. It can build services. What these things suggested framework or a recommend framework you can use it basically Spring Boot, which very easy to do it. And you can quickly build the web services using that part. So for the one module, or basically for the one component for which we have created the APIs, developers build it. Now integrate with this base framework. When it works, right, then what we have to do it? Should we have to dismantle that piece of code from the Monolithic application? Answer is no. As I said, that should be the incremental approach, right? So for this thing, what we have to do it at here, that we have build the base framework, one piece of code is there. Now we expose the endpoints, right? So that endpoint should be called from the Monolithic. Okay, it works fine. Okay, it works fine. Now pick up the another module. Do the same approach. Create the APIs, then allocate to developers and do the coding. And once coding is done, then expose and replace. So that's the way, one by one, component by component, you can replace it. So you're not going to replace the complete monolithic application with the complete microservice space. That approach is not going to work. The better approach, you have to shift one by one, right? And there are a lot of things may become, because as we see is that, everything have the some plus point and some negative, but come with some own challenge. So same way, microservice architecture will come of their own set of challenges, like the distributed transactions. We can talk about these things. Sentence logging, we already talk about. Config, we talk about these things, right? It's come with a lot of duplicate piece of code also, because whenever we are creating the services, right, we are actually adding the hops also, right? So there are a lot of things which we have to consider. But yeah, this is the approach we should take it to do it. I personally follow this approach for the at least 4 to 5 big enterprise level applications, and that works fine. So we are able to deploy in our productions, and it's working fine also. So based on my experience, and if you're going to Google it, you will read a lot of blogs, these things, but once you're going to do it, here and there, you will find the same approach with the some here and there with the variation these things. So that's the way basically we have to do it. And sometimes it's happened, right, that initially, especially the guys who are first time is going to migrate on that part, right, they didn't realize and understand the dependencies. No worries, if you're not clear these things, don't full-fledged go for the microservice. You can think about the microservice also, and then further you can refactor it and can convert in a microservices also. So that's the approach. Also you can do it, especially the folks who are first time going to do that migration journey. So that's the way which you have to think it. There are some of the recommendation listings whenever you are going to migrate these things, when you're going to define the components, when you're going to replace the things, test, never ever think that you're going to replace the code, right? Think from that direction that you are going to replace the components one by one. So that's the approach should we have to take it, right? It's happened that as we as a techie and techie as a tier, we are more attached to the code, right? So when I say something microservice, oh, I have to replace this code with this code. So that's the things sometimes come in our mind, these things. So we have to take the one step back, think more on from the business perspective, and then plus as a techie perspective while defining the component. And as I mentioned, then go step by step. Don't think that the monolithic application going to basically going to migrate on one single shot. Think about that the one by one components you are going to replace with that part. So that's the direction should we have to go it. There are these days there's a good ecosystems is available on that part, and for these things also we are going to build the base frameworks via creating the APIs. And whenever you're going to build that part, always think the API first approach, that okay, identify the independent functionality and think that how can I build the API? If you're going to go ahead with that mindset, frankly speaking, as we can actually build a really good microservice applications, and it is not just building the microservice applications, it is going to come with a really good ROI also, like return on investment. Because if you're going to think that direction, right, actually you're going to reduce the learning curve. Actually, you are building the ecosystem for the agile, for the CI/CD DevOps, and even for the project manager perspective, it's really good, because once the create API, once we define the APIs, right, and we can assign to the multiple agile teams, right? What's the mean of multiple agile teams, right? Sometimes if we are going to build a really big application, enterprise application, right, we may have the 50 developers, maybe 100 developers. That should not be part of one application, right? This should be the part of not basically the one team, right? In agile, we go generally 7 + 2 or -2. Let's say minimum 5 or maximum 9 team member in a one Scrum team is there. So one Scrum team we can create for the price, another Scrum team we can create for the product. There's another service team we can create it for the logistical services, right? So we are basically, creating a separate isolated zones also. And we are not expecting every developer that if he is going to work in a logistics, he should know that, how login works, or how the product management works, right? So that's the another advantage, right? Because people don't have much learning curve from a tech plus domain perspective also. So that's the way we can do it. Apart from this team, for the prod support team, we are going to assign a prod, right? It's rather than one person going to take complete application. Generally, we have a 5 or 6 prod support team. So we can say, okay, but if you are going to primarily focus on the price and other things, other is going to do it. Yeah, later once they perfect, we can cross stand also. So another one will become like a backup to each another also. But yeah, this is the way we have to go ahead on that part. So I want to take a pause at here and want to take your questions, because most of the sections basically we covered. This is at a very high level on that part also. Yeah, after that, the coding comes and what other tools we can do these things. So for these things, if you need the more, reach out to us. You can reach out on the links which we can share on the chat. In case you need actual consultancy that how we have to migrate, you can always feel to reach out these things. In case you need any training on that part or any case study which we have to work with you, you can always reach out to us. So guys, that's it from my end. Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for joining the session.